On Nationwide this evening, Health Watch and a new one-stop shop which aims to fight the disease which kills 500 Irishmen a year, prostate cancer. Your eyesight and the Waterford-based research exploring how diet and a food supplement could save your sight. And how our own painful experience of violence and tragedy is being used to help those caught up in conflict and disaster around the world. And you're very welcome to another edition of the programme. This evening all our stories are health related. We're coming to you from Waterford City, and here at the Institute of Technology in Waterford, research has been carried out which offers new hope to people whose eyesight is under threat. There is a condition of the eye called age-related macular degeneration, and those people who suffer from this condition, well, they have difficulty recognizing faces, reading, watching television, driving cars, and so on. However, trials are being carried out here at the Institute which are exploring the link between a dietary supplement and the preservation of sight. Our Helen McInerney has been meeting some of the people who've been taking that dietary supplement and who believe that their loss of vision has either been slowed down or actually reversed.
For Nora Norton, being able to drive is very important as she lives in rural County Cork. Nora has macular degeneration and she has come to Waterford to have her eyes tested.
3 years ago, I thought out of the blue, they all tell me that this is, progressive and it develops. But all of a sudden, anytime I looked in a straight line, it looked wavy. It was edgy, the white line in the middle of the road, the frames around the pictures hanging up on my wall.
Could be tricky if the white line looked wavy, couldn't it?
Yeah. Now, where I was probably a bit lucky is that my left eye went very bad, but my right eye didn't. I do have it in my right eye, but it didn't go anywhere near as bad as my left eye.
When Nora was diagnosed 3 years ago, she realised she would have to make certain changes.
I thought, this is it, and kind of have to work my life around. In a few years, I may not be able to drive, etc. As far as I knew from everything I'd researched, there really was nothing. There was some American research into implanting something at the back of your eye and putting a camera in a pair of heavy black glasses or something like that, but nothing practical. So basically, I was resigned to the fact this is the way it was going to be, and it just got worse and worse and worse.
The initial prognosis was not positive, but then she heard an interview on the radio.
I can't remember who it was or what programme it was or anything, but I heard somebody talking about AMD, and so I perked up, and they were talking about this product, and I found out a bit more about it, and then I realised it being clinically trialled in Waterford, and I thought, that's great, so I rang Waterford and I talked to a girl down there.
AMD stands for age-related macular degeneration. And first you have to understand what the macula is. The macula is the centre of the back of your eye, and with increasing age this degenerates, and then it's a condition known as AMD, or age-related macular degeneration. When you get AMD, you can see everything except for what you're looking at. So in other words, you can't read, you can't recognise faces, you can't watch television, and you can't drive, so you lose your independence, your social independence. Age-related macular degeneration, which refers to degeneration of the centre of your retina, results in loss of central vision. This disease affects people aged 55 years of age or older, and it is now the commonest cause of blind registration in the Western world, and the number of people who suffer from it is going to double in the next 12 years. And it's going to double in the next 12 years simply because we're living longer.
The clinical trials that Nora heard about are being conducted by a research team at the Waterford Institute of Technology.
Thanks to the funding that we've achieved today through government funding from Enterprise Ireland, from the Health Research Board, also from the charities Fighting Blindness Ireland, local charity, the Waterford Ophthalmic Research Fund, we have been able to grow as a research community, specialising in this area of macular pigment research. We are now considered world leaders in this area of research. MacuShield is a commercially available food supplement which contains all three components of the macular pigment, the lutein, the zeaxanthin and the mesozeaxanthin. MacuShield is a product from a company called MacuVision Europe Limited. There's many companies that have different products. Bosch and Lomb have a product, Ocuvite Lutein. What's interesting about MacuShield is that it contains all three components, and therefore this is the formulation that we tend to recommend to our patients.
Nora says that since she started taking the supplement, her sight has improved.
Didn't notice anything much really for about 3 or 4 months. Then all of a sudden I noticed I was going up the back field at night without any flashlight. Then I noticed that night driving wasn't a problem anymore. I'd no curvy lines. Oh, and the other thing that happened when this set in is I seemed to lose the ability to see red with my left eye, so that orange signs on the road became a kind of a blue-grey. They weren't orange anymore. And all of a sudden I noticed I could see orange signs again.
Harry Marsland, a retired optometrist, was on holiday when he realised all was not well with his vision.
Went in the cathedral and looked the length of the cathedral to where the stained glass windows were, and you see the thin stone pillars between them. And I said to Nina, my wife, those pillars aren't quite straight. The earthquake damage hasn't been cleared up. They are straight, she said. No, I said, I can see about ½ an inch, but it's just slightly wavy. And what I knew to do was to move my gaze along the line that I was looking at, and the wave travelled with me, which meant that the fault was in my eye.
Harry thought the problem was temporary, but when it persisted, he went to see his ophthalmologist.
2 years ago, I couldn't see outside in the dark. I had to have somebody holding my hand. I needed a big magnifying glass, bigger than this, to read the paper, Radio Times and things. And it was going down at that stage quite rapidly.
When Harry visited his ophthalmologist, he was handed a leaflet about MacuShield.
I took it home and read it, and I thought, there's something in this that I haven't heard of before. So I bought some MacuShield tablets, and within months I realised that we'd turned the corner and I was getting better. It isn't an overnight thing. It takes weeks, months, or a year to improve. The reason why I'm putting it down to MacuShield is it's got one ingredient that nothing else has. That is mesozeaxanthin.
There's two types of age-related macular degeneration. There's early and there's late. In the early form of disease, you don't know you have it. The doctor, if he looks into your eye, will know you have it, but you don't know you have it, and you're at very high risk of going on to getting the late type of disease. And the late type of disease is typically the wet form, and that means you've leaking under your retina. If this happened to you, you would know this because you would get distorted vision. So straight lines would look wobbly, like the lines at the bottom of a swimming pool. And this is extremely urgent. If you get wet age-related macular degeneration, it can be very well treated nowadays, but it has to be treated urgently. But we have very good treatment now in the form of injections such as Lucentis. And if the patient is treated quickly, a sight can not only be preserved, but in a very high proportion of cases, can be restored.
It's just over 2 years since Jimmy Ahern noticed his sight deteriorating. But when he visited his optician, he discovered a new pair of glasses would not solve the problem. He was referred to a consultant, and the initial prognosis was not positive.
It just came along, and I tell you, it was like a train hitting me and knocked me over. I couldn't believe it would happen to me, but it did. I was told that I'd lose my eyesight in 3 years, and that's 2 years and 2 months gone. And down the road since then, and when I got involved with Dr. John Nolan here in Waterford Institution of Technology, that I got into him by accident, and I started taking the MacuShield. And since then, my eyesight is after stabilising and just holding. It did not go back since. And what I'm holding now, I feel very happy with that.
I got a phone call from Mr. Ahern. He was very upset because he had just learned that he had macular degeneration. And unfortunately, a lot of the information given to patients is that there's very little can be done. I believe, however, and the science supports me, that there is a lot we can do in terms of prevention. So we offered to Mr. Ahern to come to our facilities here in Waterford Institute of Technology, where we measured his macular pigment, and similar to Harry, we recommended a course of nutritional supplements, MacuShield. Similar to Harry, we saw that Mr. Ahern's macular pigment level also increased, and we've seen improvements in his acuity as well. So he feels his quality of life subjectively has improved.
So the message is early intervention.
If you're saying that they have the early form of the disease and that appropriate dietary supplements will reduce the risk of going on to get the blinding form, yes, intervention will A, reduce the risk of them going on to get the nasty form of the disease, but B, in some cases, with the supplements which contain lutein, zeaxanthin and mesozeaxanthin, such as there's one commercially available product known as MacuShield, that actually, in some cases, seems to actually improve vision, though this evidence is anecdotal thus far.
Hopeful research being carried on there at the Waterford Institute of Technology. And if you'd like more information about macular degeneration, you can get it by ringing the research department here at the WIT. The number's on your screen right now, or indeed, of course, you can also consult your own doctor or optician. Now, prostate cancer is, of course, a curse amongst men. It takes the lives of 500 men every year in this country, of course, and there is no national screening service. However, a clinic in County Kildare is now offering a one-stop shop. Now, Mary Fanning went along to find out more.
Rory Hafford is a medical journalist for over 20 years. He recently published a book on prostate cancer called Mantrap. That resulted from a television programme about the disease some years ago, when he interviewed one John B. Keane about the disease.
Men are shy about talking about that area of their anatomies, and I found that other people who had prostate cancer would not discuss it with me. A few did, and we were a great help to each other with the treatment and that kind of thing. There's a lot of little tricks you can learn, you see, and it's a dreadful embarrassment, you see, because you're dashing to the toilet every minute.
And afterwards, the eminent author pulled him aside.
After the cameras stopped rolling, he pulled me away into a corner in the little snug of a pub that he had in Listowel, and he said, "Do me a favour, I'm going to be gone in a couple of months. Ask one question, and let that one question be, why could they not have found this horrible thing sooner?" That's where the book started and spun literally all over the world, asking the same question of medics, urologists, specialists, people who knew the answers because they were working in the area all of the time.
The book is described as Rory Hafford's hard-hitting investigation into the diagnosis and treatment of the disease. His research brought him to County Kildare and the Irish Centre of Integrated Medicine. Here, he found what he'd been looking for, a one-stop prostate assessment.
They have tests that are sensitive enough to indicate whether or not there could be activity in the prostate. Now, that does away with a couple of things that men would balk at, like, for instance, the DRE, or the digital rectal exam, which I know some men who would rather chew their arm off than have it. Now, men have to get over this problem. They simply have to. What this clinic does is it gets around these things and it tests directly as to whether there is or is not activity in the prostate. And that means that they can then take the next step forward.
And it's clean.
The tests conducted by a specialist GP include 5 phases.
It combines 5 different parameters: a questionnaire to work out the risk of developing prostate cancer, followed by an ultrasound examination on a full bladder, followed by a uroflow. If there's an enlarged prostate, you'll get stopping and starting, so you'll see that through the uroflow. We then do a subsequent follow-up ultrasound to see has the bladder emptied sufficiently. Then that's followed by a urine analysis, a PSA test, where we get immediate results all within 1 hour.
The combination of the tests amount to a high degree of accuracy.
We're confident in a certain degree with each component. But if we add the blocks and we build up one, we can build up a final unique image of what we have, and with this we go as close as we can to 100%. I would say fairly would be 90%, more than 90%.
The results are available within 1 hour, and the PCA3, the specialised antigen blood test, takes 2 days. The file can then be passed on to a consultant who now has a definitive pattern to work from. Austin Breslin had prostate cancer, but it was nearly 9 months before he went for treatment. The delay was partly his own fault because he was afraid of the regular tests, and partly because of the number of consultants he had to see. His cancer was first noticed after a regular thermography imaging health check of his system at ICIM before the one-stop prostate assessment was available. If it was available, his attitude would have been completely different.
I would have made a decision a lot faster, rather than, as you say, I did dither a lot. So I would have been faced, I would have been confronted with the facts, and I would have had to do something about it. If those facts were facing me there, it would have kind of shocked me or motivated me into doing something about it immediately. But I suppose I was one of the lucky people that I did have that little bit of time. Others may not be that lucky.
Austin is lucky his cancer is gone, and he has moved a step further. He set up a counselling service for sufferers and their relatives. Rory Hafford's book is aptly named Mantrap. It resulted when Ireland's beloved John B. Keane asked why. And the man tasked with asking that question is adamant that men must exercise greater vigilance and take control to protect their own health.
The old argument about it being an old man's disease, or you're going to create an army of worried well people, I mean, to me that's a nonsense, looking at it from a simple, logical point of view. Worried well? I would rather be worried and well than terminally ignorant. And I don't mean to insult anybody with that, but the hard messages about prostate screening or prostate cancer have to be got out there. And where we are at the moment, basically men are on their own.
And isn't it good to hear that men are being much more proactive about their own health? And of course, if you have any reason to suspect that you have any of the symptoms of prostate cancer, do for God's sake go along to your doctor and get it checked out. Now, the dreadful Omagh bombings of August '98 left 29 people dead, many more injured, and of course a whole generation traumatized. But even out of that awfulness, something positive has now arisen, because the methods used to counsel and to help the sufferers in Omagh are now being employed in other areas of conflict and disaster. Places like Bosnia, Sri Lanka, Nepal and New York.
Disbelief, horror, pain, suffering, bereavement, tears. No word or collection of words can describe what it was like for those who were in Omagh on the day of the bomb, for those who tried to help, for relatives and friends. And for some, the images and the pain of that day just wouldn't go away.
I got extremely bad, crying my eyes out for no reason and not knowing why I was crying and not knowing what to do to stop crying. I made a comment one night to my mum, something along the lines of, "You'd be better off dead." Mummy's words, not mine, because I don't remember what it was I said. And she completely panicked. And this was at one night. The next morning she phoned the local priest and said, "There's something wrong. we need you to get help for Honora."
At the time of the bombing, David Bolton was the manager of community services in Omagh. Later, he was to be involved in helping those who'd been traumatised. In the bombing aftermath, he was in the leisure centre where people came for information on missing relatives.
It was an exceptionally difficult situation, with at times of elation when people were discovered and found to be alive and well, to absolute despair when the truth began to dawn that somebody had died.
David Bolton could see that a lot of people might need help in coping with the disaster. He turned to Dr. Kate Gillespie, who was a psychiatrist working in Omagh at the time. She had trained in cognitive therapy, which has as its core the view that how we think affects how we feel. Dr. Gillespie was aware of the new cognitive therapy approach for treating post-traumatic stress disorder, just developed in Oxford by Professor David Clarke. This was the approach of the newly set up Omagh Trauma Team. It had never before been used in circumstances like this.
In this model, we have to specifically work on the trauma memory. We have to flush out the negative appraisals and help people to reappraise them. And we have to help people to reclaim their lives by re-engaging with ordinary activities, because we believe that all these things contribute to keeping the trauma alive.
And brought to bear on the pain and horror of the Omagh experience, the approach really worked.
The treatment just gave me back my life. I had no control over it beforehand. I didn't know what I was going to feel like at any given moment of the day. And after the treatment, I definitely had have control completely over my life.
The post-bomb trauma team has become the Northern Ireland Centre for Trauma and Transformation, and the experience it's gained has now been used in other areas of civil strife and natural disaster, including Bosnia, New York, Sri Lanka, and the latest, Nepal.
The therapeutic approach we had used here very much addressed the human need. And if you can make that method culturally sensitive, then it will address the needs that exist in other places, which are just like the needs that we have experienced here.
Nepal's on the other side of the world from Ireland, but it too has had its conflict. A conflict which has brought trauma in its wake.
From the Northern Ireland context.
Dr. Michael Brown's an expert in using media to help communities bring about positive change for themselves. He's based in Enniskillen, but through working in Nepal, he became aware of its problems.
The level of trauma was actually incredible from the civil conflict. Children had experienced some very violent situations of their parents being killed or their school teachers being killed, and it really was affecting the whole community in very severe and very deep ways.
The Nepalese were looking for a solution.
In our context, nobody knows about the psychosocial council and how we can deal with these kinds of children who are suffering by that kinds of incident.
Through Dr. Brown, the Nepalese organisation Kapala Nepal was put in touch with the Omagh Trauma Centre, and there was a sharing of training, which developed into a 2-year project funded by Irish Aid and the Irish Leprosy Mission. The Nepalese filtered the Omagh experience through their own culture, coming up with their own way of expressing the problem and finding a solution.
We learned from Omagh that we needed to do two things. We needed to help create the conditions for people to get better on their own. That was the first thing. And the second thing was we needed to find a way of developing one-on-one therapy for the smaller number of people who might have problems in the longer term.
And they managed to do both these things, proving again that the lessons learned through the pain of the Omagh bombing can be applied to other and very different communities.
Actually, it turned out that over the 2-year project, the methods and the experiences from Omagh have been incredibly valuable to the Nepal context.
Sharing and spreading the help. And that ends our programme for this evening. We do hope you found our stories interesting and maybe even helpful. Do join us again at the same time on Wednesday next. Until then, from Waterford and from all of us on your nationwide team, a very good evening to you. And on next Wednesday's programme, the old sod gets a makeover and a new role in life at the hands of a County Tipperary couple. Reinventing the humble gate and making it more user-friendly, a northern inventor comes up with the answer. Taking the fear out of learning to drive, they've set up a kind of car college, and the jammy idea which has become a successful business.